and welcome officially to WISE Immigrant Meet the Candidate series by Miss Immigrant USA. First, thank you so much for being here with me today and with the audience. The whole purpose of the Meet the Candidate is to learn about the leaders and the leaders who choose the path of serving others, and you yourself made this decision to serve others. We would like to learn more about you, who you are, and what shaped you. What was this moment and why that you said, I need to run for Congress, I need some changes, and what kind of changes? And how has been the journey for you? Your mom was an immigrant, yes, and you are second generation. We would love to learn about your family heritage, the culture, how it's shaped you. So please, Ericka, the stage is yours. Share with us as much as you can.
Absolutely, I'm happy to, and thank you so much for having me. I grew up right here in my district in Henrico County, went to Henrico County Public Schools, Tucker High School. I was in the foreign language immersion program at my high school, and I grew up loving the Spanish language, and I grew up to a mother who immigrated to the US from Africa. She came to the US in the 1960s or late 1960s, early 1970s from a very small country in Eastern Africa called Eritrea.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of culture in our home as far as food. There were a lot of languages in our home. My mom spoke 5 languages growing up, including a local regional like dialect called Habesha. She also spoke Italian. So I would hear my mom speaking in other languages at home. So I'm first generation as far as my mother's side. My father was white. He was, all kinds of different European ancestry between English and German and Scottish and a bunch of other things. And so we really had like a different mix of cultures in my home growing up. I was very fortunate to grow up with both parents at home, as well as my older sister, who I voluntold to be my campaign manager because she is the most detail-oriented person that I've ever met in my entire life. And there is nobody else that I would trust. She's been there literally my entire life, and she knows me almost better than I know myself at times. And so growing up, there was always a sense of hard work in my family, not just from my mother, who came from literally nothing and made a life for herself in this country with my father, but also from my father himself. He lived to work, and he was constantly, from the time that he could until the time that he could not, he worked. And so that sense of grit, that sense of hard work was instilled in me very early on. And it was a combination of a bunch of different things that led me to the path of becoming an attorney. There has been zero family members in my entire family lineage that we could discern that went into law. So, as far as we know, I am the only person in my family ever who has gone through law school. And that, of course, brought its own changes. It brought its own difficulties. We ended up losing my father while I was in law school, so it was definitely like a very difficult time. And then COVID, of course, on top of that. So it was a lot of different changes. And prior to going to law school, I wanted to become a public defender. There was always a sense of service and a deep calling to serve a community, whether it be my local community or people nearby me. I always wanted to serve. And although it did not work out that I went into public defense, I ended up going into healthcare law after I clerked for a judge. And that's the field that I'm in now. And so I represent healthcare providers who have malpractice claims against them or administrative claims against their license. There's a lot of also overlap between what I do for healthcare providers and federal agencies. So, like if there's an investigation into a provider or a practice by the FBI or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service, that might be something that I help with. So there's very much this overlap between the federal government and what I do presently. And in particular, over the last year, I have seen that my own Representative Rob Whitman, he has not been responsive to the people at all. There have been at least four, and at this point, even more town halls, candidate forums, different events that he's been invited to at
Mhm.
home in our district that he has declined to be at for one reason or another. And it's very telling that we are yearning for representation and we're not getting it. Not only that, but we've seen his voting record. We've seen what he's done and what he hasn't done. And what he hasn't done is uphold his oath to the Constitution. What he hasn't done is represent the people's best interests. And so, knowing that, I began thinking in April of last year, anyone could do a better job than Rob Whitman, anyone at all, even me. Why not me?
Yes.
So I thought about it and I thought about it and I thought about it some more. And then we got to last summer. And before my representative voted in favor of the big, I'm not going to call it by its actual name, bill, he had put in a letter that went out publicly that he would not do anything to take money out of Medicaid. And that's significant because he himself grew up on Medicaid. He received Medicaid as a child. And so he issued this letter signing his name to a statement that he would not do anything to hurt Medicaid or its funding.
Mhm.
But then he voted in favor of that bill. And that for me was the last straw. And the same month that that bill was signed into law by the president, I filed my paperwork to run for Congress to unseat him. Because we cannot live in a world where we have a representative who is not representing us. And I can't stand for it.
That's very inspiring.
Thank
And
you.
I wish more citizens and immigrants and all of us had more courage to take action like you did.
Thank you.
How was it filling out the paperwork finally when you got on the ballot, your name? What was the feeling for you like?
Oh my gosh. So between filing the paperwork and actually officially getting on the ballot was a really long period of time.
Mhm.
And not just because, it was last summer that I filed the federal paperwork, but also our process in Virginia here got a little bit sidetracked because of the redistricting effort that was happening here in the Commonwealth. And so that effort moved deadlines back somewhat. And so where it would have been April that we would have, submitted everything in order to officially get on the ballot, it became the end of May. And so we didn't end up getting confirmation that I was on the ballot until just a couple of weeks ago. And so from the time of filing until actually making the ballot was 10 months. And so it's a very long period of time. There was a lot happening and there's been a lot happening even since. There was a sense of relief that I felt knowing, oh my gosh, we went at this not knowing how to go about doing any of it. My sister and I say all the time that we're learning to fly the plane as we build it. And it's really doing everything that we can possibly do on our own, finding little bits and pieces from here, from there, from people that are so generous with their time and energy to help us. And we're just taking it and running with it. So it was definitely a sense of relief knowing that, hey, this is really happening. We're finally on the ballot. But at the same time, it's also like, okay, we're on the ballot. Now there's still so much more to do. So we did have a moment of, yes, we did this. Okay, now let's really get to work.
You said that your mom was from Eritrea, yes? And but then you said that your second language is Spanish.
Mhm.
And as well, how did your family reacted when you make this decision to run?
So, Spanish is not a language that my mom speaks.
Mhm.
It is something that has always intrigued me from the time that I was a child. I remember having a CD that it had like how do I explain this? It was essentially like a game, but not really. And it almost gamified learning a language.
Mhm.
And I have no idea how I came to have this CD, but I loved it. And I was so enamored with the Spanish language. And I remember like keeping my own notebook with all of this vocabulary that I was learning through this CD. And I was just infatuated with not only learning, but also with learning a new way of communicating. And so it was really just from an early age a desire to learn. And that propelled me forward to continue learning Spanish through middle school. And then towards the end of middle school, we had an opportunity in the county in which I live to apply to different specialty centers in high school. And it just so happened that the specialty center at the high school that my house was zoned for also had this specialty center for foreign languages. They had at the time Spanish and French, and I knew that I wanted to continue my enjoyment of the Spanish language. I knew it would be difficult because this program it taught a lot of different classes that you might not think
Mhm.
in Spanish, like, for example, algebra, world history, gym,
Mhm.
which that was probably the most interesting of them all. But it taught a very immersive curriculum in completely in Spanish. And so I decided that that would be the center that I wanted to go to. I ended up getting in, and it was a really great experience. And it's allowed me to be fluent in a second language, a language that I did not really learn from either of my parents. And it's allowed me to continue to communicate with people across language barriers, people from different parts of the world, and it's been a really great way to get to know more people. And as far as my family's response to my decision to run for Congress, they were a bit surprised at first. They didn't really understand why I was doing it, but they knew that if anyone in our family could put their mind to something and do it, that it's me. Again, no lawyers in my family ever, and I did that with flying colors. And so it was a situation where my family said, "Okay, well, if this is what you want to do, then we'll support you." And I said, "Great." And I asked my sister, I said, "Tanya, I want you to be my campaign manager." And so I mean, again, she was voluntold to do it, but it's become a way that we have spent more time together. And not just that, but it's become a way that we can both plug into our community and give back, which I know is something that's very important to her too. It's been a little bit more of a challenge for my husband. Granted, he is a disabled combat veteran, and so there is a lot of give and take that comes with this desire to run for Congress. It, of course, keeps me away from him more than I would like to, but he understands why it is that I'm doing it. He understands why it is that it's needed. And I'm grateful that he supports me. Other members of his family have been somewhat supportive, somewhat not, depending on the individual. Some can't understand why I would want to go up against a Republican who has deep pockets of dark money. And they see that I'm doing it. They see my reasoning. And now they're starting to see that there's been more press around my campaign.
Mhm.
And now they've come around. And so that's been an interesting thing to see kind of where we started versus where we are now and the familial support that we may not have had from everyone, and it's now coming back.
What family stories, traditions, or values from your heritage, from your immigrant heritage, stayed with you the most?
That's a really good question. There is in so my mom again is Eritrean, but she is half Eritrean. So her father was from Torino, Italy. And so between the Italian culture, the Eritrean culture, there's a lot of togetherness. There's a lot of wanting to commune around the table and eat together and share conversation, share stories. And so that has really stayed with me throughout not just this run for Congress, but in my life in general. We want people to be brought into our family. And if that's the case, you know, we invite them to dinner and we sit around the table and we talk about everything. We put away our screens and we enjoy a meal together and enjoy each other's company. And that's very important to me.
Many children of immigrants, when they grow up, they feel the pressure from their parents to succeed, to prove themselves, for the sacrifices that the parents made for them. At least that's what the kids they feel like this. Did you ever have this feeling?
Oh, absolutely, I did. And it was an interesting combination because not just the fact that my mom is an immigrant, but also combine that with my mom grew up extremely Catholic. She went to Catholic school. We were in Sunday school from, gosh, as early as I can remember. We were part of the church from as early as I can remember. So not only was it pressure, but there was also guilt. So I do remember that when I was in middle school, I wanted to stray away from continuing with my education in Spanish, and there was a lot of pressure to keep up with it. And my mother, to her credit, she was right, but in the moment, it was very unkind the way that she
Mm.
described how she wanted me to continue with my language skills. And so there was that pressure. There was pressure in high school to continue to succeed, to continue to go forward, to make good grades, to get into college, to continue my education on. And there was a lot of comparison. In addition to pressure, there was comparison. Um, Between myself and my older sister, we're 10 years apart. So when I was in high school, she was in college. There was a lot of, well, you could do this, you could do this. She gets good grades, why can't you get good grades? Not to say that I didn't, but if ever there was one bad grade, there was always a comparison. And I remember being in college and having all of these different classes that were very heavily science-based. I majored in forensic science in undergraduate education, and my mom would tell me, like, you could be a surgeon. Like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You could go be a surgeon. You could go to medical school. You could be a surgeon. And I'm like, oh, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. And my mom, of course, knew because from a very young age, I would parrot personal injury lawyer commercials, ones with jingles, and I would go around the house saying that at 2 years old. And so my mom very much earnestly, but also honestly, because that's who I was as a child, she did push me to get good grades, to consider law school when I was in college. I did drift from that desire as well. I pursued forensic science, which is the application of science to law. So it was nearby the legal field, but it wasn't in it. And so when I realized that I was at the end of my rope as far as advancement opportunities in the forensic science field here in the area, there was pressure to go to law school. There was pressure to do more things in law school. There was pressure to work in the field. But then once I got through law school, I think the pressure kind of stopped. I had my law degree, I had a license to practice, and so I think there was a bit of a job well done there on my mom's part, but it it did always come with pressure, and it did also come with guilt.
Mm. But later on in life, we forget about this and we were like, okay, she was right, they were right.
Yeah,
That's how life is. It was difficult for me, but we have to go through that.
yeah,
And because of this, we learn a lot of lessons. So,
sure.
what is like one lesson that you remember that you learned from all this experience?
That's a great question, and it goes along with something that you said earlier, and I don't know that you would realize this, but you said keep going. And that is the motto that I've carried with me for many years at this point. It was something that helped me get into law school. It was something that helped me get through law school. It helped me get through bar prep, passing the bar. Has helped me get to the point where I am today. Keep going. Things are tough. Things can be tough.
Mhm.
Life is hard. The world that we live in today is very hard, but we just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep going.
What does belonging means to you as someone with a multicultural, bilingual, bisexual, and multiple backgrounds? Where do you find yourself?
This question, if you had asked me several years ago, I probably would have given you a different answer. And that answer would have been that I don't really fit in any one group.
Mm.
And I think now that's more of a strength than it used to be a weakness because belonging, I can be in so many different groups. I can belong with not just the Eritrean side of my family, but I can also belong with the white side of my family. I can belong with my husband's family, who also happens to be white. I can belong in my neighborhood where there are so many other people that look like me and so many people who don't look like me. There is a sense of community, but there's also a sense of being able to fit in with a lot of different groups and to be a part of a lot of different groups. And that belonging is it's community to me at the end of the day. We're all people. We're all in this life together, whether we like it or not. We're here now in this moment, in this space, and we are community, and that to me is belonging.
You chose to go into the healthcare law, or does it happen somehow on the way on your career?
I love this question because I sort of fell into healthcare law. It wasn't something that I actively pursued. It was more something that just kind of happened. And it happened over the course of time, and I didn't really see it coming.
Mhm.
And so what I mean by that, I was absolutely dead set on wanting to go into public interest and specifically to be a public defender. That was where my heart was. That was where my internship was. I worked for a court-appointed criminal defense attorney at the appellate level. And so I assumed that my path was set out based on what I was doing professionally, based on the internship that I had, and in my mind, I was set. And then during my first year of law school, I saw an attorney who a few months before that I had seen practicing in court. And he had made a bunch of different arguments during a hearing that I just so happened to be at because of the court-appointed criminal defense attorney. So I'd seen this attorney argue and I was really impressed. And then I saw him at this event and I felt compelled to go up to him and introduce myself and let him know that I had seen him argue in court just several months before and that I had been impressed. And so I did that and he was like, "Wow, okay. Well, thank you." He gave me his business card and we kind of went about our way. That was in October of 2019. And just a few months later, we were all locked down for COVID. And so things were a lot different. I did my internship in a public defender's office, albeit virtual. I was there, I was working with a public defender on staff at the time. And maybe several months after my internship ended, still during the period of COVID, but things were starting to reopen again. My second job outside of working for the criminal defense attorney was at an ice rink very nearby where I live. It's an ice rink that I grew up playing hockey at. It's an ice rink that I grew up figure skating at. It holds a very special place in my heart. And one day I'm working and I love that I worked there during law school because I had an opportunity to do my homework, which was great. And in walks the attorney that I had met the year before at the event in my law school, who I'd seen argue in court. And I said, "I remember you. You and I met at this event." And I had come up to you and said I had seen you argue in court and that I was very impressed. He's like, "Oh yeah, how are you?" And so it was this interesting kind of reunion. And he had been bringing his kids to take lessons. They were taking figure skating lessons because they were going to learn how to play hockey. And that was special to me because I was still playing hockey at the time. And so he kept coming in, bringing his kids. We would catch up over the course of a couple of years. And during my third year of law school, um, I remember speaking with him and saying, "Yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet. I'm thinking about a couple of different things." And he gives me his business card again. He's like, "Well, we're looking for a paralegal for medical malpractice. Do you know anyone?" I was like, "Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I'll shop it around. I'll see what I can do for you." And so I didn't think much about it. I end up working for a judge in a clerkship the year after I graduated. And within a couple of months of starting that, I casually mentioned to this guy, again, when he came into the ice rink, I mentioned, "Hey, I'll be looking for a job come August." Gave me his business card again. He said, "When that time comes, you call me." And I said, "Okay." So I did. And he was still working in medical malpractice defense. And it ended up being that it was a good fit at the time. And so that's where I ended up going. And I loved it. It was something that was always different. There were always different injuries, even if it was the same allegation of a healthcare provider breached the standard of care. No two injuries were ever the same. And I really enjoyed that. My practice ended up changing at that firm about halfway through my time there, and I realized that I wanted to stay with healthcare, and I didn't want to do the other thing that I was doing, which was auto accident defense. I really did not like that. So I ended up having a friend who was working at another healthcare law firm, and she reached out to me at a time when I was very stressed out of my prior law firm. And she said, "Hey, if you want to go to a different kind of healthcare defense firm, give me a call." And so we talked, and I ended up meeting her bosses, and the culture seemed like a better fit. It seemed more in the way of what I was looking for. And so I made the switch, and I've been there ever since. It wasn't something that I anticipated that I would enjoy. And now it's something I can't expect not to do.
Mhm. Many immigrants come to America believing in fairness, opportunities, but then they face the system and the difficulties to navigate it. How can we restore the trust in the system and in the government?
I think it's going to take time, energy, resources, and a lot of political will to do it. I firmly believe that we need a pathway to citizenship for anyone who desires to become an American. And the way that we have the system now, it's so heavily focused on enforcement and not giving that mechanism for actual citizenship. And so I think our focus needs to be less on enforcement and more on funding the jobs that will allow for processing the applications to get green cards and eventually to attain citizenship. So as it relates to enforcement, I want to get rid of immigration and customs enforcement altogether and then fund fully all of the administrative aspects that are needed in order for people to apply to become American citizens.
And then once they become American citizens, as what we can see now, there's a lot of division between the immigrants who are like citizens, like hard citizens. Then there are the immigrants who became citizens. There are the other immigrants, like immigrants, and there is the immigrant identity. Everyone is kind of putting themselves or others in a different bucket. But after all, we are all coming from the same source. How do you see this issue in America? And what can we do to more start uniting people again and not spreading this division?
I think we need to remember that we are all people first, whether we be people from, for example, Mexico, Canada, Europe, Africa. We're all people. Even though we may have a different origin or a different origin story, we're people and we're people in America. And that is a common ground that we have, all of us together. And I think once we start coming at conversations and getting to know people from that place of common ground, from that fact, that simple fact that we are all people and we're all people here in America, then I think we can realize that we have more in common than we do that divides us. At the end of the day, my focus is people first. My focus is one that puts out love. And I don't agree with all of the hate and division that we have. This country was built by immigrants. And I think we need to remember that. And I do believe firmly that our greatest strength is in our diversity. And if we can recognize that and understand that we have more in common than we do that separates us, I think that's going to be a much better use of our time than trying to divide all of us into different buckets.
Ericka, this is WISE Immigrant Podcast, and we ask every guest to share their wisdom of the community. Please share yours.
We will get through this together. We will get through this together, and I will continue to treat everyone as though I, or treat everyone how I want to be treated. And I hope that others will do the same too.
If anyone would like to learn more about you, where they can go and find you?
Absolutely. They can find me. Sorry, my dogs are barking. They can find me at my website, which is erickakopp.com. That's spelled ERICKAKOPP.com. You can find me on social media. I am literally everywhere except X. And my social media handles for everything are EK, the number 4 VA, with the exception of Blue Sky, which is my website at erickakopp.com. You can email me at ekforva@gmail.com.
We will include all those links
Thank you so
in the
much.
description. And Ericka, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story, sharing the wisdom, sharing your experiences. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful getting to meet you. And remind me, what was your name?
My name is Magdalena.
Magdalena?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you, Ericka. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.